No, it's probably I'm misremembering.
There were a few different committees that had new members.
Yeah. Okay, well, why don't we jump right in? Call the meeting to order. Approval of the agenda. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to read the agenda. It's a relatively short one today. Are there any comments or changes or things to be added? I'm watching the participant list in case anybody uses a little digital hand, but
Yeah.
feel free to just kind of wave at me or shout out. We're a small group today, so that's all right.
I don't have
Okay.
anything.
Okay, seeing no objections. Somebody want to move to approve the agenda? Yeah, Maureen moved, Ron second, all in favor. Seeing yes. Fritz, you're good. Yeah, Michael, okay. Agenda is accepted. Adoption of the minutes. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to look through the minutes, which was from way back in May last year. That was the last time we met. So any issues or questions regarding the minutes from last time? No, they looked good to me. Okay, somebody move to accept the minutes.
Okay.
Anyone? Fritz is moving. Somebody second. Maureen second. All in favor. I'm going to take that as a yes. Okay, minutes approved. Ron, you'll see the excitement of the procedures in our committee meetings. We'll get to the good stuff. Public comments. Steph, I'm assuming since nobody's here, there's no public comments. Okay, so we'll move on. Council referrals. So we turn it over to Daniel. What have you got for us today?
Thank you, Robyn. So set up my screen. Okay. Do you all see that PowerPoint? Okay.
Yeah.
Correct. So this is a report and a presentation that I gave to council about early February, I think. So what are we, about a month ago. And it goes through, well, I'll tell you, it goes through development potential on Bowen Island. So we did this report to present council with information on development and specifically development that may occur on Bowen Island without further council approval. So that was the lens that we were looking at. We looked at 3 different sources. So vacant residential properties, lots within our standard zones. So the rural residential and the settlement residential that could be subdivided or that have subdivision potential, and then looked at some of our larger comprehensive development zones and remaining units within those zones. All my caveats, so staff are aware of gaps and emissions and all the data sources. So this report is intended to be high level information rather than very detailed projections. And then this is about development potential. So it's not a population projection per se. It doesn't say like when things will be developed or what the timing of it will be. So it doesn't mean that the lots shown would be developed in any immediacy. So like when you look at, when I show you the vacant properties list, there's vacant properties that were just created by subdivision, and there's vacant properties that were created by subdivision in the 1920s that somebody's owned and has always intended to build their dream Bowen home on, and is still vacant. So the first thing I did is look at vacant properties. So I took data from BC Assessment, who released their latest update January 1st of this year, showing, and they have a category to show what's vacant, and their data dates from July of 2020. So it doesn't reflect lots that have been created since then, or lots where construction has started since July. So if something started building in the fall, it would still be shown as vacant. But so we linked it to our GIS data to map it, and then excluded lots that I could identify as not having residential potential. So it flagged things like municipal parks that we hold in fee simple that may be zoned residential, some strata common property, some small crown land parcels all showed up in the data. And then went through about 50 of the parcels to confirm that what BC Assessment had mapped matched what we knew existed on the ground. So we identified over 300 properties that are residential and vacant, so that where development could take place without further discretionary approvals, it would just need the building permit application. And I didn't consider underdeveloped properties. So there's places in Snug Cove where the zoning allows more development than exists now, but that wasn't considered. And then I provided a breakdown by municipal water system to assist in aquifer planning that's currently underway. So this was the legend of the breakdown we got. So 320 vacant properties. And you can see just based on the water systems, it's like mostly in the Cove Bay, or not mostly. The largest number would be in the Cove Bay system, but some vacancies in all of the water systems, and then as we see in this map, all throughout the island. So a mix of large vacant land, primarily at Cape Roger Curtis, a lot of vacant properties, and then small sort of building lots scattered throughout the island. The next one we looked at was subdivision potential. So considered large properties in those rural residential and settlement residential zone. And to do this, I just looked at the size of the property and to see if the size would permit further subdivisions. So if there was a 1 hectare minimum lot size for a 10 hectare lot, I would say it has potential for 9 more additional lots. So it could be 10 lots out of the 1 lot, but didn't consider other aspects that are considered at time of subdivision. So access routes, servicing, environmental, geotechnical considerations, any of those things that also come up during subdivisions. So my big caveat is not every lot identified on the map will be able to be subdivided.
It's all under existing zoning, right?
Under the existing zoning.
Okay.
Yes. So everything this is almost providing counsel, like if you don't approve anything else, this is what could happen, rather than looking at what does the OCP say or what's like potential, beyond that. But this is sort of like the baseline piece. I didn't consider subdivisions that could come up in our zoning where, for example, if 2 lots neighboring are each too small to subdivide, but the 2 lots can actually combine to make 3 lots will happen in our zone. And the other thing that can happen in our zoning is that we have a smaller average lot size if things are in a community water system. So there's places where lots are not in a community water system, they can't subdivide. But if they were to join a community water system or were to create their own community water system, you'd be able to create additional lots. But with that in mind, I identified over 200 lots that could possibly be created through subdivision without requiring a rezoning. And then in terms of the CD zones, so these are comprehensive development zones that have come about as a result of rezonings over the last, you'll see over the last sort of 20 years. Some of these, I flagged ones that had active subdivisions, but these would have been active at the time of the BC assessment data of July 1st. So there were recent subdivisions in Arbutus Ridge and Parkview Slopes and in Cowan Point that have been completed in December, but they don't show up in the vacant data. So I've included them still as active subdivisions. Then there are a couple other caveats. So I mapped the CD zones, but I just mapped the whole CD area. So the map will show a large pink area, but some of that may be park or golf course or whatever it may be. And then finally, the CD zones, those lots themselves appear in the vacant properties as well. So they'll count as a vacant residential property and potential CD zone. So it's hard to just add the 2 numbers together and say there could be this many lots. But what I found looking at it is we had 387 remaining units that could be created in those CD zones, including some of them being those active subdivisions that have since closed and could be built on. The largest remaining numbers are in the Grafton Lake CD zone and then in the Cowan Point CD zone. We then took just a step further to see, okay, what type of dwellings could be created in these CD zones. So looking at, mostly are they detached or attached? And almost the most surprising thing is the number of units that could be created as attached or detached. So both Grafton Lake and Cowan Point have zones which permit it to be either attached or detached, but staff expect that likely that they would be developed as detached dwellings. So the existing areas in Cowan Point that allow that sort of attached or detached, they've all been developed as detached dwellings. But there are 35 units in the Grafton Lake development that would be under a affordable housing agreement, and same with 14 detached dwellings in the Arbutus Ridge development, again developed under terms of a housing agreement. So then that was the breakdown just by type. So 58 units identified to be attached, roughly 150 to be detached, and then 200 to be either. And as I said, we would expect most of those to be developed as detached dwelling. So this is then the equivalent map showing the pink, the CD zones, and the yellow being lots that are large enough to subdivide.
Daniel, it doesn't include secondary suite potential.
It does not include secondary suites, no.
Okay. And it doesn't include active rezoning applications.
It doesn't include active rezoning, no.
Okay.
So that's the end of my presentation. So I'll just stop the sharing now. There we go.
Thanks, Daniel. Does anybody have any further questions or comments?
So yeah, maybe with the water, the expansion, because you said you can get smaller lots, more subdivision, if water is supplied, right? How did that work out? How does it affect the numbers, kind of?
I'm not sure how it would affect the numbers per se. Like I didn't then do a second pass and say, okay, in the SR2 zone, if you're in the community water system, how many more could it be?
Okay.
But broadly, it's like, if you're zoned SR2, you will have a 1 hectare minimum lot size if you're not in a community water system, and you'll be a 0.4 if you are. So you're roughly, you're more than double the density of the zone.
Yeah.
Now, most of the lots, like you'd either be in the, if you're SR2, you're either in the water system already. So it doesn't affect like that many lots, but same with some of the rural zones as well have a difference if you're in a community water system or not.
And are there some that could just sort of immediately opt into a community system that aren't on it? Or would we be talking about the development of a brand new community water system to suit those ones that you've identified?
Yeah, I'm just looking at the map then of where they are. So I know that like there's some that are adjacent to the Eagle Cliff Water District, for example, that had tried an earlier subdivision, maybe 7 or 8 years ago, had wanted to join the Eagle Cliff water system, and the water system said no. So they weren't. We didn't expand the boundary. We didn't include them, but if there was a more secure water source, maybe they could join. But generally, it's like the ones that would affect are not close to adjacent water systems and would be creating their own.
Yeah.
And I know that the requirements for that have gotten more stringent over time. So people sort of not threaten, but they kind of say to me, well, then I'll just create a water system and I can, get more units. And I say that's great. Just go talk to Coastal Health about what you have to do. And then, then you can do it. And then they talk to Coastal Health and they don't come back.
Yeah, that's my understanding is it's an incredibly expensive endeavor to do that. So I think it's pretty unlikely that that's would happen, especially for a pretty small development. Great. Well, I mean, I think this is really useful information, and I feel like, I don't know if it was of any use, but the work that we did, whenever it was, probably not last year, the year before, where we sort of mapped out the development potential. I know that was slightly different looking at kind of what's been approved and everything, but I feel like these both tie in really well and give like mayor and council and give the community a really good sense of kind of what is out there already, like what's going to like has the potential to be built out already, what's been approved already, and is available for housing on the island. So I think this was a really worthwhile endeavor. Maureen?
Yeah, and that was the basis. Sorry, Maureen.
Yeah.
That was the basis of the work that I did. Is I took that as the starting point.
That's great, Maureen.
Yeah, I just want to support what you said there, Robyn. It did come out of that initial impulse to map out what can be called all sorts of things, but the hidden housing market is what I tend to call it. And I think that when you consider this report alongside the housing needs assessment, that there are some pretty significant implications that could be drawn for the purposes of policy development on housing, which I'm assuming is going to be one of the next steps now that we have this report and we have that needs assessment. If we go in the same direction that this report indicates, we're going to have more detached homes. We're not going to be addressing an affordability crisis. we're not going to end up with multifamily residential. And if we want to go in that direction, okay, but I just want to make sure that it's a conscious decision.
Yeah, thanks, Maureen. And I think, yeah, that's a really good point. And I think next or coming up on our list is going back and looking at that housing needs report and checking in on some of those things we'd identified last year. But agreed, like it's there's, you know, potential to develop policy, or I think we've talked about it before. Fritz, you remember, like incentives, right? Like how can we incentivize the housing we want to see, as opposed to maybe creating a bunch of rules and zonings and all of that stuff. How can we help people to create that kind of housing that we think the community needs, now that we've identified what's out there and what the potential is?
That's that two-tier zoning is a very simple concept that's easily understood, you know, like
Okay, so that's
if you want to go over
okay.
all the different potential that there is, that goes, you know, as you know, I went, I mean, the last almost year, I haven't been able to do much, trying to keep this office going through through COVID.
Yeah.
But having said that, before I went through the whole OCP and the LUB, and to me, it's obvious that the committee can do all kinds of things to facilitate more forms of housing, however affordable that is or not, but even smaller. But because it is more long-term, I noticed that in the previous sessions, there was more focus on getting things done instantly, and the long-term was not that much on the agenda yet of the Housing Advisory Committee. But maybe it is, I mean, some things council can do quickly if they want to, you know. We can actually make a report and divide it into what can council do within a few months, you know, what can they do when they get elected more than one term, you know, I mean, that type of thing. It's all there, and we're certainly not the only municipality that is thinking about all these things, you know.
Yeah, Maureen?
Over the last summer, we worked in the Environment and Climate Action Committee. We put together our climate action strategy, and the structure of that mimicked some work that had been done at Metro Vancouver.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
It was framed in terms of quick wins, medium-term steps, and long-term.
Yeah.
It's sort of a boilerplate kind of structure, but it would give us a template to start really thinking through what the recommendations might be. And, you know, they might be as, you know, potentially politically problematic as, for God's sakes, start allowing people to have trailers on their property. You know, if they're dealing with the environmental impacts, to you know, a resolution to not allow rezonings that are focused exclusively on single-family homes, because there are more than enough options there. So I think putting forward something that is really quite probably a bit on the bold side, it would be nice to be bold, and have council do the backing off or the supporting as they went through their considerations. I'd like to see that as part of our work plan, because our work plan needs to be shaped up for this year pretty quickly.
Hey, Marie, is that boilerplate structure for Metro Vancouver available easily somewhere?
Oh, no, just the structure is that quick wins, medium term, long term. If you look at our climate action strategy, the climate action strategy, you'll get an idea of how it was approached.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
I'll do so.
Yeah. And then that puts us out of the realm of talking OCP and LUB, although that can be brought in to support the arguments, but it actually focuses on the actions, which would be good.
Yeah. For sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I've written that down, Maureen. Any further thoughts on this presentation from Daniel on the development potential of all of the various lots? No? Okay.
Just one thought, Daniel. Are you? This is a great piece of work, probably a rather foundational piece of work you've done. We may need, and I'm looking, if I may, at Maureen's to agree. We may need to spend more time on this because it is what it is. But I think the implications contained therein are significant, and the people around this table probably got a pretty quick study, but I think we're going to have to go into a more general conversation to really look at what does this mean? And so we can take out some of the terms you use every day, have a bit of a glossary of terms, make things easy to understand for everyone. If you like a sort of planning for dummies exercise, but I think it will be helpful. And I just, Maureen, I don't know how you feel, but I think this is something that we need to spend more time and need to make it as easily understandable as possible in terms of the implications going forward. Because it's very easy to get caught up in the jargon amongst people familiar with the same. But people need to be able to more generally understand this excellent work done so that it doesn't get lost, the details don't get lost. So Daniel, somehow we're going to have to work collaboratively together to make sure this gets more exposure and understanding. Please don't let it get lost because it is quite technical in areas, and being technical, you lose the wider audience.
Yeah, and maybe some of that comes from my sort of caution of
I understand.
You know,
I totally get it. I totally get it, and I thank you for it. It's just that it's so the implications are so significant. I just don't want to see any of it get lost in the process.
Okay.
Sorry, Robyn.
That's okay. No apologies. Steph, did you want to jump in?
Councillor Nicholson was correct. There is another member. I haven't gotten to appointing him yet, and he's in the waiting room. If we can admit him, Robyn. Council has appointed him, but I haven't sent him a letter
okay.
yet.
I have no objections. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks. Sorry and thank you. Everyone goes, surprise, when he comes in. His name is Glenn Pierce. Thank you, Maureen.
Hard to keep track.
Glenn, I'm so sorry about the timing issues. Welcome.
Hello, Glenn. Welcome to the meeting. Hi. So hopefully you can catch up. We have been recording, so you can catch up on the beginning of the meeting later. We've just had a presentation from Daniel, so we're at item, where are we? 4.1, or we're just wrapping up 4.1 on the agenda. And I think, Michael, to the point that you had just said, I just wanted to follow up. So Daniel, are you planning on doing any more with this report that you've done? Because Michael, that's what I heard you say, was taking this report that Daniel's done for council and that he's just given us. Is it that you're wanting him to make it a little more digestible to the public, or is it maybe something that you think the Housing Advisory Committee could work with him on to put some more information into it and give it more context? Or like, is it, I'm not sure. Daniel, did you have any plans to take it any further?
I think it's on the agenda for our council strategic session on later this week to talk about it with council further.
Okay. So well, let's leave it with them then, and they can make a decision about the strategic priority, and if they want the Housing Advisory Committee to take any part in that, they can give us direction. Yeah,
I mean, in terms of, I guess, what I envisioned is like, one is, not making it forgotten. And then it's like potentially updating, but it wouldn't be updating till, it's like next year when the new BTS assessment data comes out. It's like, okay, that would be a good timing to then just update it and have a new updated version of the numbers.
Yeah.
And sort of all sort of the background work we're doing is also just keeping in mind that, as our OCP gets older, it's nicer having like updated reference material available that would sort of form the basis of any update process that that we're a few years out from, but it's sort of looming.
Yeah, okay, Maureen?
Points. One is that this report's been referred out to 5 or 6 different committees. So when it was presented to council, it was seen as really very good work and very significant. So all of those committees are providing feedback of some sort or another. And I don't think there's a hope of this report getting lost in the discussion. It just, the implications that can be drawn from it are really pretty profound. So the focus will be there.
Okay, great. So I guess the question, Daniel, for you, this is a referral for you. Have you got what you need from us? Do you need anything formal, or are we just accepting it as information, or?
Yeah, so council referred it just for information. So for the committees to know. Yeah.
Okay, great. Excellent. So we'll wait and hear back more after strategic planning's done. But I think this information, we can build on it as a committee and just see where it takes us once we're creating our work plan. So I'll move on to item 5.1, which is the Bowen Island Housing Needs Report, which was completed just about a year ago now. I can't remember, Steph, there was a request to put this on the agenda. And then I think what I had said was because I know if you go ahead to page, what page is it on of our, is it page sort of 8 of our agenda? We identified last year some of the items from the Housing Needs Report that were action items that we thought that we could work on as the Housing Advisory Committee. So I thought maybe let's revisit those now, see if they're still valid for us to include in our work plan for 2021 and discuss them. So I'll start. So page 8, it was explore rent bank. And I know we looked at this at the time, and you'll have to forgive me. I'm actually, I'm going to click on the link and see. I don't think that we've made any progress in this.
Do you want me to share the screen like with a Word doc? Maybe?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So we had identified that as something that we as a committee could potentially work on and look into. The second one was setting targets, and I know other municipalities have done this. Identify a specific number of affordable housing units to be available by a certain date to be approved by council. I mean, and that could vary as well, sort of building on what Maureen had said. It could be maybe it's affordable housing, maybe it's diverse numbers of housing, maybe it's sort of, avoiding more single family, those kinds of limits. So I think it could be all encompassing of just setting some housing targets. Maybe it doesn't even have to be specifically affordable, but diverse housing targets, if that makes sense. Just looking and seeing what Steph's doing on site here. Oh, there we go. Yeah, no, that's okay.
Irritating.
So that's all right. So we've got rent bank, which I think is potentially worth exploring, setting targets. And I think that could be sort of, discussed and massaged a bit. And I know that this came out of the Housing Needs Report about affordable, but I think that maybe that could be expanded to include diverse housing units as well. Next one is continue, and please jump in, any members, if you want to say something. I can't quite see everybody's faces and hands, so just sort of jump in if you have a comment. So continue our Housing Advisory Committee subcommittee work, including the land use bylaw review, which is will now be informed by the Housing Needs Report. So that's a good one. Daniel, where are we up to with, I know you sort of were doing, I think you were doing a couple stages of the land use bylaw review. One was just kind of a little bit of housekeeping and keeping up to date with code changes and stuff. And I think that's passed. And then there's another one coming, or where are you up to with the land use bylaw update?
Yeah, so the housekeeping one, I have an open house next week. I think it's received first reading, the bylaw.
Okay.
I have an open house next week, and then I'd come back for a second in, I guess, early April, and then would be looking at public hearing in late April and potentially adoption in May.
Okay. Late April. Okay, and that's just like you say, that's kind of just the housekeeping one.
Yeah.
So, so there's still potential to get in on the more robust review that you're planning on doing.
Yeah.
And I know we'd started working on that. Fritz had done a lot of work on it. And I think just as for all of us with COVID and everything going in the last year, it's kind of stalled. So we could pick that up again. for sure, and look at some of those requirements. And I think it's definitely worth looking into what Fritz is recommending about two-tiered zoning, if that's something that Bowen wants to look at, or as Maureen said, ways to incentivize or, well, de-incentivize single family houses, incentivize, you know, anything but single family houses, those kinds of things, whether that's in land use bylaw or in other ways. Okay, so I think that's worthwhile keeping on our work plan. So the next one I'm going to is support planning staff with review and prioritizing of all strategies and actions included in the housing need report. Is this still valid, Daniel? Do you need our feedback, or in supporting planning staff with review and prioritizing of all strategies and actions? Is that something your team
Yes.
is? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Daniel,
So that,
may I ask, in
yeah,
what
please.
way could we be most helpful for that goal?
I mean, yeah, that's one that I have. Like, I have a draft report that hasn't made it finalized to come to council. So maybe then it's like our next meeting is looking at specifically those pieces, like even before I go to council, to discuss with the housing committee.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think if that would be useful, I think that would be a good way to use us as a resource.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And thanks, Maureen. Good question. Next point, make connections and collaborate per 9.2.2 strategy 1, facilitate more discussions between private nonprofits, developers, and landowners concerning new affordable housing developments. I think it's potentially still valid. It just kind of depends on the capacity, I think, of the committee and what we're able to do. I feel like that's, for me, in some ways, is a bit of a lower priority, just because there is quite a few things happening on the island. So it's not, yeah. Anyways, I don't know how everybody else feels about this one. I think it's worth keeping on the list, but maybe it's lower down on the priority list. Maureen?
I'm wondering if that might end up getting captured a bit in the community economic development work that's going on right now, because they are intending to meet with specific stakeholders, and they have identified developers as a group that they want to meet with. And among the first batch of feedback that's coming out of that survey is feedback around housing. So by default, we might end up with information from another source that would be helpful on this point.
Okay, so sorry, Maureen, they're engaging with them by a survey, is that right?
There's an engagement plan. So there's an online platform and a survey, and there'll be focus groups, and there'll be strategic meetings with different stakeholders. Okay.
Is that something that you think it would be worthwhile being collaborative with the Housing Advisory Committee, or is it just let's leave the Community Economic Development Committee to do it and we can just kind of reap the benefits of the information?
I think reap the benefits.
Okay. Okay, great. So let's leave that. I think that's a great idea since they're already being engaged by one committee. Next, draft a report to address recommendations and items from 9.1.1 strategy 1, enhance density on properties that are already served with municipal water and sewer lines, particularly in existing urban properties. I'm not sure whether this is worth pursuing at this stage, only because, I mean, so Daniel, I know we've got sewer systems in the Cove, which we know capacity is an issue currently. And then I know Cowan Point has a sewer system. Are there any other sewer systems on the island?
That's it.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, so it would really, because I think the Cove, it's on pause at the moment. So I don't think this would be worth spending time on until the Cove's sewer system issues are resolved, and then it would just be looking at Cowan Point. So I'm not sure if that's a good one for us to explore at this stage. Although I don't know how important the sewer lines are, because if there's municipal water.
I mean, I
Yeah.
agree, Robyn. I think because I know our public works are looking at like aquifer planning for the water systems on the west side as well. So it's kind of,
Yeah.
it seems premature to start planning
Yeah.
more development in them until there's some certainty on that.
Yeah, so I think that's a great way to put it. So given Public Works is working on these issues, I think this is let's defer this to at least sort of next year maybe to look at for further work until they've kind of done their assessments and have a plan in place. Yeah. Okay.
And maybe
great.
it's something to flag then is like if something's presented to council about the aquifer planning or that's referred to the housing committee in terms of
Okay.
implications.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay. And then further on, Steph, if you're able to scroll, is there anything else?
it.
Okay, everything else. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Any other comments from any other members? Yes, Ron, please.
What is the rent bank concept, please?
Oh yeah. I looked up the website.
there's-
Yeah. Go ahead, Steph.
Just Robyn will explain, but just for you, Ron, as a new member, there's a link provided there,
Yeah.
but Robyn will explain for now. But so many things are linked in here.
I did click on that, nothing happened.
Yeah, I'm honestly, I'm not, it's been a while since I looked at this. I'm not 100% familiar with it, but I'm pretty sure the rent bank, just from looking at the website and refreshing my memory here, is like basically it's a pool of money that is available that if somebody is in sort of short-term distress, like they for some reason lost their job or their work temporarily, or you know, an immediate financial, you know, a major car repair or an accident happened or something, that for some reason somebody who's on the edge of being able to sort of pay their rent has a sort of devastating financial situation that they can't make their rent, rather than them losing their housing because they're going to miss 1 or 2 months rent, or they're just on the cusp. I think the rent bank is there just to provide that little bit of assistance to get them over that hump so that they don't lose their housing, because that's even more devastating and difficult, and moving's costly and all that stuff. So simply helping somebody out with a couple of months rent just to get them over that. So I think that's sort of the concept is helping people that way. And I believe this program is currently through the Van City Foundation, so we'd have to look into it. But yeah, that's the concept. And I think it's looking into, one of the work plan things would be looking into this. Is Bowen eligible? Do we have to set up our own thing? Or how do we connect into it? So I think that's kind of what we would do as an advisory committee is how can we help people on Bowen, even if it's just making them aware or facilitating how they could apply or those kinds of things. So that would be part of what we would do.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on any of these items that we can put into our, I mean, I think that would probably be it for our work plan stuff. I don't even have.
Do you want to look at the old? Yeah.
Let's look at the old work plan.
Well,
and maybe.
The
Yes.
one thing that I was thinking of that's not there, and I didn't see that at the prior presentation, sorry, but anything about discouraging the production of unaffordable housing. So, well, we may not have the capacity right now to say we want more dense development in the Cove, for example. We could say, no, you're not allowed to knock down 2 houses to build 1 or something of that nature, right?
Well, it's an interesting idea.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what's competing. That's the ultimate competing factor here. If we could essentially just drive down real estate prices. I mean,
for instance, West Vancouver says you cannot consolidate lots, because like what was happening in West Vancouver, that some large, really lots that are really larger than anybody needs were created simply to build expensive houses. And there's a bylaw that you cannot do that. You can subdivide, you cannot consolidate. I mean, that's just one small step in what you're saying.
yeah, why don't we start? That seems
Yeah,
like a one for us to
But I don't
propose.
know how often it happens on Bowen, but it may happen in the future, because with some people having far too much money and some not enough, you know, it could happen actually, you know.
I feel like, oh, sorry, go ahead. Maureen.
We have discussed, but not reached a landing on house size. And obviously, if you're building a smaller house, it's more likely to be in most instances affordable. But that's probably as far as that discussion has gone. And in part, I think it is because we haven't seen a lot of instances of that. And how many demolitions roughly would there have been in the last year? Daniel, do you have any?
Daniel is, I don't know.
I don't have a sense. I mean, generally they're associated with a new house going in.
Yeah, but there aren't a lot. I know that.
Yeah.
Mhm. I think, Glenn, I think it's a really intriguing idea. And I think that that's not, that would be part of one or two of these items that we've identified in our work plan, either the setting targets or the sort of subcommittee work that we're doing of the land use bylaw review that Fritz has also done a lot of work on. And I think that's part of it, would be identifying like, and I keep repeating myself and I apologize, like ways to incentivize what we want and de-incentivize what we don't want. And I think there's multiple ways of doing that. So I think part of that would be maybe subcommittee work on brainstorming, thinking of all those different ideas, prioritizing them, you know, from, you know, the, like you say, the quick wins, kind of as Maureen put it, the quick wins, the medium-term goals, the long-term, what's more realistic, what's more way out there. But yeah, I think those are intriguing ideas. And so we should probably have, maybe we should have like a subcommittee kind of brainstorming idea around those kinds of things. I think that would be worthwhile.
I think too, what I've heard like most often, I guess, would be talked about is like limits on the size of dwellings. Some communities have just a cap and a maximum size, and Bowen doesn't.
Yeah.
We ran into that a few times, right? I found one thing kind of interesting. You know, in Delta, they have this issue that these huge houses are built kind of on farmland, and it's really hard to control. And I kind of, and then I noticed that it was downzoned significantly to in that 4,000 square foot range. And I couldn't figure out where that number comes from, because Richmond and Delta have enough houses with large families, multi-generational living in one house. So you have to watch that you don't make the houses that small that cannot happen. But actually what they did, they used it on value, because if a really large house can be built, then the land value goes up. And that makes it more difficult for a farmer to buy it. So they actually said, I found it interesting, it was an economical calculation, financial calculation. So what they did is they tried to figure out at which point a farmer, most farmers, can actually buy the land for farming. And so the house size was set that people that have too much money couldn't buy that land, couldn't build a large house on the land.
And price out the farmers.
Yeah, so that it kept the price down. That was one of the main things. In some areas, I find that the maximum house size, I find it a bit arbitrary. You have people saying, well, people shouldn't have more family members or so. While you can also argue that multi-generational living, which is more happening in you know, like for instance, in the East Indian or the Chinese communities, and there's houses, they have just a different idea what a single family house should do. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, we want to be respectful of different cultures and different family types and everything. Absolutely. So you don't want to limit that. But I think we've talked about it before, and it's worth exploring what is that maximum size. And I think, Fritz, as we said before, whether it's through two-tiered zoning or something else, that there's a maximum size, but then you're incentivized if you're going to build a secondary suite, if you're going to build a rental thing, like allowing people, like if they can build something else that we want as a community, that they can sort of get that extra space, or rental ready. We talked about that, like those kinds of things, having a suite rental ready in the dwelling or whatever to get that extra space.
You know, I think it's really key is on a neighborhood basis, however you draw that neighborhood, because if you make it too much like blanket zoning on the whole island, it will have the unintended effects, and you get more opposition, and it doesn't really work. I also liked what we spoke about before about these pilot programs, and I think some communities actually do that. In a way, the city of North Vancouver does that, because if you look in the advertisement in the North Shore News, there is always, every week, a few rezonings, and the power that they have is because they look at it really on the merits of each zoning separately. And if there is no neighborhood opposition, or one may be approved, another one isn't, but there is no set kind of precedent. It's not like, and I find it kind of clever. They've done it for years, and it's complete opposite from something like Vancouver, where the planning staff or council is just paranoid to set precedents. You know what I mean? But in a way, by being flexible and looking at each application for its own merits, you actually don't set a precedent.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
one of the things that you notice when you work in different municipalities. And at times it's really hard to understand why all these bylaws are so completely different.
Mm-hmm.
You want me to share this work plan, Robyn?
Yeah, please do. Yeah, please do, Steph, and we can have a look at that.
2019, because 2020 didn't really happen.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, the housing matrix, I think we can let go. That was something one of the past members was really keen to do, and I'd have to look back and see. So we can follow up and see if Allison got anywhere on that one, but I think we have some of that information, don't we, from, I feel like from the business licenses and stuff, right? We got some information about like summer staffing numbers, and do you know what I mean? So I think in the business licenses, you have to fill out how many, like I remember when we were talking about business licenses, when I was on the Community Economic Development Committee, we asked about certain employee numbers so we could have some stats on like employment needs and summer staff. Okay, so I think we have some data there if we dig for it. Identify Bowen specific information and needs. Yeah, I think that's still valid. I don't know that it's been done. We just have anecdotal information. So whether that's worth engaging with the community to figure out. And I think that was just for the new members. That was about trying to identify other than housing, because we are a housing advisory committee, but if there's other things like this job space zoning, which is kind of the new term for like workspaces and industrial spaces and all of those kind of things, because obviously those spaces can help facilitate the construction of housing. Like that could be a limiting factor on the island, it's possible. So that was what that item was about. Stay in the loop provincial needs assessment requirements. I think we can strike that off because we've done that and completed it and we're up to date. And then ensure annual housing needs assessments complete. That's been complete.
Ooh.
Could I just ask, it's annual? Daniel, are we looking at doing another housing needs assessment?
It's not annual.
No.
I'll put two strikeouts on that then.
Yeah.
Is it every 3 years or 5 years? I can't remember.
Every 5 years.
That's what I thought.
It had to be done within 3 years, and then it has to be redone every 5 years.
Yeah. Okay. Whether it needs to be, well, I think we'd be hard pressed to push to find funding to do it more often than that. I'm just guessing to meet the requirements every 5 years. But between that and the census information, on the off years, that we should have a fair bit of data. Let's cross out the Bowen specific housing needs, because Allison was part of the discussions when we reviewed the housing needs assessment, and we did give feedback on that. Okay, development processes. So goal, identify opportunities to simplify development process. I still feel like that is potentially worth looking into, to streamlining the development process, support and education for trades. I think that actually has been happening. I know with COVID, less so, but I think that the building department and maybe the planning department, I don't want to cut you out there, Daniel, have been, they've been putting on a couple of like sessions and engaging like on the energy step code and those kinds of things. So I think that's happening. Yeah, I don't know whether we have to build on that or make suggestions for it. Review BIM processes, I'm guessing for development. I'm not sure if that's still, yeah, thanks, Steph, that's good. Yeah, continue. Whether this is still a priority for people on the committee, if we want to kind of review the processes and give comment on if we think that those can be streamlined. I'm just rethinking rezoning processes. Oh yeah, that one was an interesting one. I'd still like to kind of keep that in the discussion, only because, again, going back to this, the kind of housing that we want to see, if the municipality, say, put it out there to the community and said, hey, we really want to see some duplex zoning, or we want to see some multifamily or whatever. Is there a private landowner out there who would be willing to do this? And then the municipality could in some way support you. Like, and I don't know what that looks like exactly, but somehow streamline the process, or reduce the costs, or do something to incentivize a landowner to come to rezone for the housing that we want, as opposed to, say, like Daniel's identified, there's these parcels that could just simply be subdivided into 10 new lots for single family homes. Maybe we sort of put it out there and say, hey, instead of doing that, could you do something more interesting, and the community or the municipality could support you in that. So I think that's still an interesting thing to explore if that's feasible. I think so next one, provide clarity and certainty. I think that was sort of a comment that came out of our brainstorming and everything. And I believe, Fritz, I feel like that was something that maybe came from you. And I remember there was a lot of discussion around, is this really part of the OCP? And is that what the OCP kind of does, giving broad, oversight or overarching direction? Yeah, I'm not sure if there's any thoughts, Fritz, or anybody else has thoughts.
For instance, one example, right? Like, and that's called two-tier zoning. Okay, this is an example. There's an outright zone. This is what you can do tomorrow. And there is an encouraged tier, the second tier. But that second tier can actually be, in a sense, outright, because if you use that tier, you can do these things, right? There may still be, obviously, a development permit application, but and maybe Danielle can comment on it, but it wouldn't need rezoning, because you actually put a two-level facilitating zoning in place.
Right. So let's make that comment. So Steph, can you provide clarity and certainty? Let's maybe let's change that to something about two-tiered zoning, or review or recommend two-tiered zoning. Because
like a lot of people that would like to build something are scared of a rezoning process. It is completely uncertain. It costs tons of money. And you never know in the end if council approves it, and it may be the next council. So like we have people that just say, forget it, And it's all, I find that all these things are done for the best reasons, but I don't know if the councils are aware of how the complexities actually discourage people from taking an initiative.
Mm-hmm. So maybe, Steph, could we add at the end of that short sentence, like just sort of dash as an alternative to rezoning, just so that's clear that that's the idea, is that instead of somebody having to take on the burden of an entire rezoning process, that maybe the municipality comes up with these concepts of two-tiered zoning that can make it easier.
Later, okay, after Danielle has thoroughly reviewed it.
Yeah. Ron, I'm seeing your hand there. Yep.
What is two-tier zoning?
Oh, so a very quick explanation would be, there's other municipalities, for sure, Vancouver does it, and there's probably more. It's where if you have a given piece of land, it's zoned, whatever it is, 1, 2, 3, or SR1. And it says tier 1 is an outright, you may build a house up to, X number of square feet, or 75% of the land, like if it's got a floor space ratio or something. There's some metric that says you can build a house this big, this tall, all of those things. And then there's a second tier of zoning that says either by special approval, or you need to maybe go through a DP process, or maybe if you meet these other certain things, like maybe you have very higher energy upgrades, or maybe you provide a rental suite, or whatever it is that you decide, people have to meet a certain criteria for that next tier. Maybe you get a bonus floor space. So under the first tier, you can build 1,800 square feet. But if you build a rental suite, you can build 2,400 square feet or something like that. That's the concept, is that outright you can build this thing, but as a bonus to build what we as a community think we want, like a rental suite or higher energy efficiency or whatever that is, you may build this, you know, we're going to give you a carrot. We're going to give you this incentive to meet these things that we want, but we'll give you something for it, more floor space, more height, something like that. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah.
You
You're
know,
welcome.
it also is like in the past, councils would or municipalities would kind of pre-zone, but in a way they gave that density away. I mean, you could be lucky and the density would go up and you may sell it to make some money or so. But the idea is that as an applicant, you earn the second tier. You earn it by giving something back that the municipality wants. That's the concept.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks for
Great.
that distinction, Chris. Just distinguishing between two-tier and
Yeah, you have to earn it. It's really important because, like, yeah, and it's far more. It's a bit similar to that amenity zoning, but amenity zoning is still more vague. You know what I mean? Like you need to go through rezoning. But if the zoning is in place, it's much easier because now I guess you need a development permit because it has to go somehow to council to approve it. But there's more clarity. I mean, the OCP can change all the time, right? The idea is that the OCP it represents the vision of the community. It can change. So you may have OCP density, but you don't own that, right? But if the moment you have a parcel that is zoned with two-tier zoning, that's zoning. That's different. You know, it's completely different. There's far more certainty.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so keeping going with this one. So I think that whole like proactive rezoning, I think is worth keeping in there just as a discussion point, and you know maybe we can get into a little more detail on that in a further discussion. Short-term rentals. Oh, I apologize. I've got dogs barking in the background. I think the short-term rental one we can just kind of get rid of, right? Because that's pretty much been completely dealt with. We've given our feedback. I think maybe the only request would be that I believe there's going to be a 1 year, 18-month checkup kind of on how it's going. And if we could request that gets referred to us just for information or something, just so we kind of know how that's working out. But otherwise, I think that our work, unless Daniel, is there anything, I think our work here is done
No, that
on that
makes
one?
sense.
Yep. Okay.
We might
so
be delaying. I'll have to look at it. We might be delaying when we bring back a report, just because it's been obviously the last year when we've been licensing short-term rentals. Well, half the time they've been banned or strongly discouraged or whatever. So
it's not been a typical year. So yeah. Okay, great. Next, Steph, number. What have we got? Oh gosh, we've got more. Okay. Financial tools to feed the housing reserve fund.
You're doing great.
Yeah, we're at 4 o'clock. Okay, we're not doing too bad. Financial tools to feed the housing reserve fund. I think that's still, I'm not going to read every single one. I think that's still a worthwhile thing for us to work on. And yeah, the MRDT is something I know Birch and the tourism are trying to actively work on, and it would be nice to keep pursuing that. But yeah, let's just kind of leave those as I think, unless there's an objection, I think it's worth still trying to explore those tools. Number 5, identify challenges.
I had a quick question about that.
Yeah, sorry, yes, please jump in because I can't see everybody. Yeah, so go ahead, Glenn.
Along with that, is it feasible for us to adopt the empty homes tax that we're exempt from to pop in there in that case?
I think we can add it to the list of things to be discussed. Absolutely. Again, these are just kind of high level. Let's make a work plan for the year. So I don't think anything's off the table at this stage. And then when we get to working on this item, I think that's yeah, I wouldn't want to take anything off the table at this stage in terms of discussion and ideas.
Okay.
I think Glenn, that's the it's like the BC, the speculation and vacancy tax.
Yeah.
That we're exempt from, and the empty home tax is the Vancouver one that the city of Vancouver is special in their charter, so they get to apply empty home tax, but we couldn't.
So we could,
okay.
but we could. So could we go to the province and request that we no longer be exempt from it? From the
Well, it's,
Potentially, we wouldn't be like the money wouldn't come to Bowen necessarily. So it's maybe not a financial tool, but it's a policy recommendation. But
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I know that the province has
you really
like,
open up a can.
refused municipalities who have asked to be exempt. They haven't followed. But I don't know if any municipalities have asked to be included in what the province has said.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robyn, if I may, at this point.
Yes. Yep.
If you are going to put that on for a discussion, by all means, let's discuss it. But let's not forget the energy and the amount of involvement we had from this community in getting us out of that tax. So it's going to be very highly divisive if we're going to make a suggestion or start discussing going back in. It was a matter of huge letter writing and lobbying to get us out of that tax. I don't want to take a particular view on this, but there was a vast groundswell of opinion on this island that lobbied to get us out. So I ask that we think about this carefully before we now start talking about going back in. It might, I've heard it talked about before in other forums, but people then sort of tap folk on the shoulder and said, do you know what trouble we went to be exempt? So I think that is something we need to look at very carefully, because there's going to be very much split opinion on that.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yeah, point taken. I don't think we'd want to ignore the community on that one. But to my point, and I think to Glenn's, it's at this point I don't want to take anything off the table. Like, let's leave it as a discussion point and to be looked at and researched. Maybe there's other ways of achieving it. And I mean, Daniel's kind of given us feedback that in those specific ones, we're probably pretty limited as to what we can do and what financial benefit that would reap directly to the community. But at least it's part of a brainstorming session and discussion. Who knows where it might lead, right? It might lead to other ideas and other things. So yeah, I think point taken for both of you. That's a good point. So let's keep number 4 in there.
Maureen,
as,
Robyn, Maureen.
Yep, go ahead. Yep, sorry, I can't see everybody when we have the screen sharing happening. Go ahead, Maureen.
Just 2 points related to that. One is that the census data that will be available next year, the housing data in the census, I think is going to be really interesting in terms of thinking about the makeup of Bowen. I'm really curious to see what shifts have taken place between owners and renters and what shifts have taken place in terms of occupied versus unoccupied. So after that data is available, I think that will inform any discussion of empty homes tax. The second point is that we are increasingly as a community being designated as rural, and that I think would probably mitigate against our being deemed eligible for the speculation and vacancy tax. But all to be continued. It's definitely, Glenn, it's definitely an idea that's crossed my mind at various points. And at the moment, there's been enough other stuff to occupy my mind.
Yeah. Okay, great.
I'm just writing notes here, Robyn. So.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I mean, we'll go through, we've got 1 or 2 more, and then I think we'll wrap up. I know there's 1 or 2 more quick items on the agenda, and then it'd be interesting to think about how we can start to tackle these. And I'm starting to think that it might be that we make our meetings, if we sort of plan to do our monthly meetings, start to be kind of working sessions, and we take on one of these subjects in each of these and give ourselves a 45-minute time slot or something and work together. Because I think it's going to be, at least for, I'm going to wager at least the next 6 or 8 months, we're still going to be online via Zoom. So we'll have to figure out how to work together and do that. But yeah, maybe we can start to take these on, and then maybe there's like one subcommittee, I think, which might be the land use bylaw review, which I think maybe needs its own separate time because it's such a robust topic, and then we can bring that back to the group. But let's keep going. Number 5, identify challenges and barriers. I feel like I mean, the bylaw review is in there. So if that's under here, I think let's get rid of the housing matrix because I think that's just sort of an old thing that we were looking at with a past member. Let's cross out infrastructure challenges for now because we know Public Works is actively working on that, and I think it's a work in progress that's probably at least a year away from hearing any results. And let's leave in engage with the community. It's an option we can look at. And yeah, so I think that's good. That encompasses our bylaw review in there.
I would like to keep
Yeah.
the infrastructure challenge in it because
Okay. Yeah.
I never understand why there hasn't been a response to, like I gave Belterra as an example in the past.
Mm-hmm.
You sit on a septic field, and that septic field one day can have development on it. So I don't see anything wrong with that particular principle. And if we have to wait forever for infrastructure, then that is something that private sector can just do.
Well, and maybe are we, Steph, and maybe Daniel, are we allowed to, as a committee, to request an update from Public Works on what they're doing and like infrastructure and stuff? Are we allowed to ask for that?
What they're not doing, because like the
well,
yeah, because we know what the idea is.
Yeah.
But okay, so if a person has a big piece of land, you can easily put septic in to put in development, right? So I mean, it's like a no-brainer. But if it's not going to fly, I like to know why, and then we just abandon it. You know what I mean? But
you are not allowed to ask for that. You can ask council. No. You can ask council to direct staff to provide an update.
Okay.
Or I could sniff around offline and.
Yeah, I feel like it might be too
but
soon. Just, and I don't know, Daniel, if you know off your top of your head, like I feel like. Oh, sorry, Fritz. Go ahead.
Sorry, Fritz.
I like to know exactly how Steph is sniffing offline.
Oh. I feel like Public Works is like pretty actively working on a few of these things, and I don't know that there's anything to report for a little while. Is that what do you know, Daniel?
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say for water, I know like Patrick presented to the Environment Climate Action Committee on some of the water infrastructure.
Okay.
So I bet we could share that same presentation and the video.
Or share the video maybe even, because we could just watch the video of the presentation from their meeting. Yeah, that might be useful. And then the sewer system update, I don't know where that's at or what. Again, I feel like that's a little ways off before there'd be any kind of concrete information.
Yeah, I mean, I think Patrick is, aware of challenges but I don't know if there's a whole lot of like resolution to bring.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Fritz, I'm happy to sort of leave it in there. And then when we discuss those challenges, we can bring it up. And when we talk about that topic. Number 6, finding housing solutions. Speaker series. I mean, look, let's leave it in there because if we do hear of an interesting speaker, it might be worth bringing somebody in, especially because we can do it by Zoom and everything. That actually kind of makes it easier in some ways, maybe, as opposed to having somebody physically come all the way out to Bowen. So I think it's still a good idea if we can find somebody. Researching best practices, other communities. Well, let's take Roger's name off of that because he's not with us anymore. Or not on the committee, I should say. That sounded a little final. Research best practices, other communities. So,
are you looking for a volunteer to head that up or something?
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, look, all of these are we have to figure out how we're gonna figure it out. But if you'd like to do that, absolutely, Glenn. Like, if anybody wants to take any of these things on, please like jump in and say I'd be glad to do that. If people wanting to do. Yeah. Okay. Great. So we're putting.
I'm
Glenn
also
on there.
happy to help out on the points under number 5. If unless that's just for like who's in charge or something like that.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Nope. That's fantastic. And yeah, so we can figure out how to tackle these things. And if you do research and then bring it to, like, say, we might plan out that maybe each of our meetings we tackle one of these. So if you do research and then bring it to that meeting, We might not, because actually we're running a little over time, I think already. So maybe what we'll have to do is identify kind of which future meetings we'll do with certain topics. And then, yeah, we can do the research and bring it to that meeting.
Do you want your name out of all three, Glenn?
Yeah.
Yeah, please, maybe I all.
So should we do sort of a standing item then, Robyn, like an update for people?
Yeah, I think so. Or like work plan, working session or something like that. And we'll just pick, because we've only got the, I don't even think it's 6, is it? Is it 5 now? Because we deleted the short-term rental. So we've got 5. So, you know, like, so the next 5 meetings, we take a 45-minute chunk, depending on how heavy the meeting is. If we get a couple of referrals that are going to take a while, we can skip it. But, you know, if our meetings are on the lighter side, we can take, you know, a 45-minute chunk and work through these issues and use them as kind of a working session. Yeah, so I think just in the interest of time, I won't go through each of these finding housing solutions, but I think let's keep that on the list. And when that one comes up, we can look at each of those in detail, because I think pretty much all of these are kind of worth still exploring. Excellent. Okay, sorry, I'm just aware of our time and that we're running over a little bit. So back to our agenda. We've got other business, and I kind of just threw that in case, because we do have a couple of new members. If there was anything that our new members wanted to bring up or questions or anything like that, we can always also talk offline. If you wanted to have a chat, feel free to call me or email me and we can talk about things. Was there any new business from anyone, or in particular our new members? No. Okay, seeing nothing, we'll move right along. We do have to do, we have to do elections. I forgot about that. So election of chair and election of vice chair. I don't think we had a vice chair last year, which turned out to be fine because we only had a couple of meetings. So would anybody like to be the chair of the Housing Advisory Committee? Shall we nominate anybody?
I'd like to nominate Robyn, if you're prepared to accept again.
Okay. Does anybody else want to consider the role?
No.
No. Okay. All right. I will humbly accept and continue for this year, and with the hopes that we can, thank you, Rod, with the hopes that maybe we can get a vice chair on board at some point, and I can pass the torch eventually, but happy to continue for this year. Do we need to actually, Steph, do we have to actually like formally, what's the process here?
Let's do it. Practice voting.
Okay, so I've been nominated. All in favor of, I feel weird, all in favor of me continuing as the chair. Okay, everybody's in favor. Great. Okay.
That's perfect, Robyn.
And is anybody interested in being the vice chair? Your responsibility really
It's your revenge time.
It's, yeah, is mainly if I can't make it for some reason, you chair the meeting pretty much. I think that's kind of it, isn't it, Steph? Like,
yeah,
formally.
Sometimes they can help with reviewing minutes. That's
okay. That's a good one as well. Okay, anybody interested in being vice chair?
It doesn't sign me up to be the next chair, right?
It doesn't automatically, no.
No, Glenn, but I think you should know it's a slippery slope. In fairness to Glenn's comment, I think he makes a very good comment, because when we're now looking at committees within our municipality, genuine logic would suggest that yes, if you have a vice chair, that the sensible thing would be, given some experience and knowledge and all the rest, that they become the chair. So that is not an unreasonable proposal at all. In fact, it's absolutely logical. So take it for what it's worth, Glenn, but that's the answer on that one.
It's the ideal situation, but no, it's not actually. You're not going to be held to it.
You become the Prime Minister of Canada. It's just a stepping kind.
Yeah.
All right.
All that said,
Begrudgingly, Glenn, will you accept a nomination as vice chair? Excellent.
Yeah.
All in favor of Glenn being vice chair. Yay. Okay. Thank you, Glenn. That's wonderful. Number 8 on our agenda, we have just a few information items. So read through those at your leisure. If there's any questions, let me know later or bring it up next time. Excellent. I think, sorry, we're only 10 minutes late. For adjourning, any final comments before we adjourn for the day? And I think next meeting then, should we do because we don't have a regular meeting date anymore. We used to have sort of a second Tuesday of the month or something like that, but we don't have that anymore. So do we, I hate to ask you, Steph, should we do a doodle poll to try and
It's
figure
okay.
out?
I've changed my attitude towards doodle polls now.
I know, but we'll just do one. We don't do it every month. If we can do one and we can try to find a regular, second Tuesday at 10 a.m. kind of timeline for everybody, and figure out in everyone's schedule when we can find a regular meeting date and try to make them monthly. And I think monthly except August or something. August, everybody skips out, and yeah, and work towards that. And then I'll work for our next meeting to put together a plan. Perhaps Glenn and I, as chair and vice chair, we can work on putting together a schedule for how we might tackle the work plan in upcoming meetings. Does that sound good?
I'll send you guys your individual email addresses. I think generally it's good practice to include everyone in an email that's going to be for some people, but if you're working on a project together, it's fine to deal offline.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. Nice to see you
Thank
all
you.
again. Glad we're
Thanks,
getting
Robyn.
started. Yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
everybody.
Have a good
Thank you.
afternoon.